In this video, I'll talk through stages 3 and 4 of the case illustration and exploratory literature review, exploring the literature on interfaith dialogue. Stage 3 was to expand the scope of the literature review, and many of the tasks used to create this are tasks that were discussed in the first video on stage 1 and the second video on stage 2 of this literature review. In stage 3, I added more articles to the project in a piecemeal fashion. I used the same search criteria, the same process of downloading the article, reading it in Atlas, highlighting it, and adding the resource to the project. I also added resources to the project in smaller batches at this time, rather than adding in as many as I did in the first stage. This helped avoid the tedium of adding the citation, abstracts, and notes to the document comics for several dozen resources at a time, because I found it overwhelming to code more than 10 documents at a time. Each batch of resources was coded according to the existing categories that had been rationalized in stage 2, where I identified text in the resource which had not been given a code. I immediately categorized the new code into one of the existing categories when I created it through the open coding process, dated it, and gave it a code definition. Because I was adding new resources to the ATLAS.ti project in small batches, I repeated these steps several times, so this stage comprises several iterative cycles of identifying resources, familiarizing myself with the resources, integrating the resources, and categorizing the resources into the Atlas project. The fourth stage was to identify major themes in the literature. In order to generate the themes in the literature, I reflected on my previous work, and in doing so, I began identifying relationships between the categorized codes. To capture these relationships, I linked codes to one another using named relations and code groups. To do this, I opened the Code Manager and looked at codes in the same categories. In the density column, you can see how many codes have been linked to each other. So let's work with the codes for the category Dialogue Theory, because they've been linked several times. To link one code to another, you highlight the code, click and hold, and drop it onto the code that you would like to link it with. This will then give you the options to link codes in several different semantic ways, including, say, contradicts the code dialogue, maybe it's an outcome of one, an associated, cause of, part of, property of, no name, or you can even create new relations. How you link codes together is part of your analytical process. I linked codes together in the Code Manager in this way rather than in the network view because I think hierarchically rather than visually. You can link codes either way. After I linked all of my codes, I then created categories in code groups to represent the themes. To do this, you create code groups in the same way you create document groups, which is clicking the code, holding it, and dragging it over to the code group. As you can see, the plus sign on the bottom of the cursor tells me that I'm going to create a new group, or if I wanted to add it to a group, I would select it here. Now you can see that this code, dialogue, is in the code group Dialogue Theory, and that there are 10 codes included in this code group. In addition to creating new code groups, I also color-coded them. So you can see the code dialogue is pink. So to color code something, you highlight the code, you go to change color, and you select whichever color you would like to be associated with that particular code, or in my case, that particular code group. The color coding was particularly important in my project for several different reasons. First, they were a signal to the theme for each code and what it belonged to. So if you close the Code Manager, open an article, in the margins, you can see the color of the code, which represents the theme for me. So if we open another article, and we scroll down, you can see each code is colored differently. In addition to seeing them in the code margin, these colors were particularly important because they corresponded to the colors of highlighting and tabs that I used in my hard copy books. In this way, I was able to link the Atlas project with my hard copy resources.